Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Kira Sloan pressed her red pen against the margin of Tyler Morrison's guidance file, circling the attendance issues that had been mounting since October. The kitchen island served as her makeshift office most evenings. Student papers spread across the granite surface like a patchwork of teenage problems she'd learned to solve one conversation at a time. "Did you eat yet?" Bryce called from the living room, his voice muffled by the couch cushions. "I grabbed something at school." Kira glanced at the clock above their stove. 7:30. Another late dinner skipped. Another evening spent grading while he watched whatever sports recap filled the silence between them. Her phone buzzed against the counter. Lena's name lit up the screen. "Hey," Kira answered, tucking the phone between her shoulder and ear while she continued marking Tyler's file. "Kira." Lena's voice came through strained, barely above a whisper. "Is Bryce home right now?" The pen stopped moving. Something in her sister's tone made Kira look up from the paperwork. "Yeah. Why?" A pause. Background noise filtered through the call announcements, echoing through what sounded like an airport terminal. "That can't be," Lena said. "What can't be?" Kira set down her pen completely now, turning away from the kitchen island toward the living room where Bryce sat with his back to her. "He's boarding my flight to Paris with a woman." The words hit like ice water. Kira's fingers tightened around the phone. "What?" "I'm at the jet bridge at JFK. Gate B12. Flight 427 to Paris. Same height, same build, same face. I'm looking right at him, Kira." Kira's eyes fixed on Bryce. He hadn't moved from the couch, his arm draped casually over the armrest, remote control balanced on his knee. The television cast blue light across his profile. "Lena, that's impossible. He's right here watching TV. Dark hair, that little scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike as a kid." Kira's stomach dropped. She'd heard that story a dozen times from Bryce's mother, how 8-year-old Bryce had tried to impress the neighborhood kids by riding down Miller's Hill without hands. "I can see him right now," Kira repeated, but her voice sounded hollow even to herself. "Then explain how he's standing 15 feet away from me with his boarding pass out and some blonde woman hanging on his arm." Bryce stood up from the couch, stretching. He walked toward the kitchen, toward her, running one hand through his hair. "Getting some water," he said, opening the refrigerator. "Want anything?" Kira stared at him. Same dark hair, same lazy grin, same way of letting the refrigerator door hang open too long while he decided what he wanted. "Kira." Lena's voice pulled her back. "Are you there?" "I'm here. Look, I know this sounds crazy, but I've been flying for 12 years. I know what I'm seeing." Bryce grabbed a bottle of water and twisted off the cap, leaning against the counter next to her. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same woody scent he'd worn since college. "You sure it's him?" Kira asked. "Dead sure. And Kira." Lena's voice dropped even lower. "She's wearing a wedding ring." The bottle of water paused halfway to Bryce's lips. His eyes met Kira's, eyebrows raised in question. "Everything okay?" he asked. Kira forced a smile. "Work stuff." "Kira, they're boarding first class now," Lena continued. "I have to go, but we need to talk about this. I'll call you when we land." "Okay. And Kira, take a picture of him. Right now." The call ended. Kira lowered the phone, staring at Bryce as he drank his water. "Who was that?" he asked. "Lena." "How's she doing?" "Fine." Kira's throat felt dry. "Flying to Paris tonight." Something flickered across Bryce's face, too quick to catch, like a shadow passing over a window. "Nice." He capped the water bottle. "Business or pleasure?" Business. He nodded and headed back toward the living room. Kira watched him go, noting things she'd stopped paying attention to months ago. The way he moved, the set of his shoulders, the particular way he held his head when he was thinking about something else. She lifted her phone and opened the camera app. The shutter clicked once, capturing Bryce as he settled back onto the couch. Kira couldn't focus on the student files anymore. Tyler Morrison's attendance problems seemed trivial compared to the growing knot in her stomach. She gathered the papers into a stack and slid them into her work bag, movements automatic while her mind raced. "I'm going to get ready for bed," she announced. Bryce grunted acknowledgement without looking away from the television. "I in their bedroom." Kira sat on the edge of their unmade bed and stared at the photo she'd taken. Bryce's profile, caught mid-reach for the remote control, looked exactly like the man she'd shared this house with for 8 years. The same strong jawline, the same slightly crooked nose from a college basketball injury, the same way of slouching into cushions like he planned to stay there all night. But Lena didn't make mistakes about faces. As a commercial pilot, her sister's job depended on attention to detail, on seeing things others missed. Kira moved to Bryce's dresser and pulled open the top drawer. His usual mess of socks and underwear, plus a tangle of charging cables he never bothered to organize. Nothing unusual. She checked the second drawer t-shirts and workout clothes. The third held dress shirts for work, pressed and hanging in plastic dry cleaning bags. His laptop bag sat beside the dresser, the same black leather messenger bag he'd carried for 3 years. But when she lifted it, the weight felt wrong. Too light, she unzipped it. Empty except for a few loose pens and an old receipt from Starbucks. Bryce always took his laptop to work. Always. Even on days when he claimed he'd be working from home, he'd pack it up and carry it to different spots around the house: the kitchen table, the back porch, their bedroom when he wanted to focus better. Tomorrow was Thursday. He'd told her this morning that he planned to work from home, catch up on some project reports without the office distractions. So where was his laptop? Kira closed the bag and set it back in place. She moved to their shared closet and flicked on the light. His side looked normal at first glance: dress, shirts arranged by color, pants hung with military precision that had always impressed her mother. But his travel suitcase was gone. The black rolling bag he used for work trips usually sat on the top shelf next to her own luggage. Now only her purple suitcase occupied the space. Looking lonely among the extra blankets and out-of-season clothes, her phone buzzed. A text from Lena: "Send me that photo." Kira attached the picture and hit send. The response came back within seconds. "Same guy, Kira. But here he's wearing a different shirt." She looked at the photo again. Bryce wore his favorite gray Henley, the one with the small hole near the left shoulder seam that he refused to throw away. Another text from Lena: "The man I saw wore a navy button-down." Everything else identical. Kira's hands started shaking. She set the phone down and walked back to the living room, where Bryce had switched to some late-night talk show. "What are you working on tomorrow?" she asked, keeping her voice casual. "That Johnson campaign analysis," he said without turning around. "Trying to finish it before the client presentation Friday. At home." "Yeah. Figured I'd get more done without Kevin interrupting every 5 minutes." Kevin was his cubicle neighbor, a 20-something marketing coordinator who'd started 3 months ago and asked too many questions about everything. Bryce complained about him regularly. "Sounds smart," Kira said. She studied his posture, searching for signs of deception. But Bryce looked the same as always: relaxed, slightly bored, focused on the television screen like it held answers to life's mysteries. Maybe Lena had made a mistake. Maybe airport lighting and distance had created an illusion, made some stranger look like Bryce. People had doppelgangers all the time, but the missing laptop bag nagged at her. And the suitcase. And something else: a subtle change in Bryce's behavior over the past few months that she'd attributed to work stress and their ongoing marriage troubles. The distance had started after their last fertility specialist appointment in June. Dr. Richardson had recommended they take a break from treatments. focus on their relationship for a while before trying again. The suggestion had made sense. They'd been through 3 years of unsuccessful procedures, hormones and hope and disappointment measured in monthly cycles that left them both exhausted. But instead of growing closer during their break, they drifted further apart. Bryce worked later hours. He traveled more frequently for client meetings. He started going to the gym in the mornings before work, leaving earlier and coming home after she'd already started dinner. Their marriage counselor had called it parallel living, two people sharing space but not really sharing life. Dr. Martinez had given them homework assignments, weekly date nights, daily check-ins about their feelings, shared activities that didn't involve screens. That they'd managed 3 sessions before Bryce started finding excuses to skip appointments. Too much work, client emergencies, conference calls that couldn't be rescheduled. "I think we've gotten what we need from therapy," he'd said in August. "We're doing better." Were they doing better? Kira couldn't tell anymore. They'd stopped fighting, but they'd also stopped talking about anything deeper than grocery lists and weekend plans. Her phone buzzed again. This time a longer text from Lena. "I'm on the plane now, but can't stop thinking about this. I know what I saw. Check his credit cards. Check his work schedule. Something isn't right." Kira deleted the message and slipped her phone into her pocket. "I'm going to shower," she told Bryce. "Okay." She stood there for a moment, waiting for him to look at her, to ask about her day or mention the movie they'd talked about watching this week. But he'd already turned his attention back to the television, remote control in hand as he flipped through channels. "Did I end the bathroom?" Kira locked the door and turned on the shower to mask any sound. Then she opened their banking app on her phone. The joint credit card statement loaded slowly on her phone screen. Kira sat on the closed toilet seat, steam from the running shower already fogging the mirror above the sink. She scrolled through the recent charges. Grocery store, gas station, her lunch at the Thai place near school. Normal purchases from their normal life. Then she saw it, Hotel Le Grand Paris, for $137. Charged yesterday. Her hands trembled as she took a screenshot. She scrolled further back, looking for other charges she might have missed. There another hotel charge from 2 weeks ago in Boston. $312 for the Fairmont Copley Plaza. Bryce had told her about the Boston trip. Client meetings, he'd said. The company was putting him up at some budget place near the airport. The Fairmont Copley Plaza was not a budget place near the airport. She opened her phone's web browser and searched for the hotel in Paris. The website loaded with glossy photos of marble lobbies and 4-poster beds draped in silk. Room rates started at €600 per night. The booking they'd charged to their credit card was for a junior suite. For 2 nights, Kira's stomach lurched. She closed the browser and opened a new text message to Lena, then stopped. What would she say? That her sister had been right? That her husband was in Paris with another woman while his double sat in their living room watching late-night television? None of it made sense. She called Bryce's office number instead. The automated system picked up after 2 rings. "Thank you for calling Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. If you know your party's extension." She pressed 0 for the main receptionist. It went to voicemail. "You've reached Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. Our offices are closed for the evening. If this is an emergency." Kira hung up and Googled the company's main number. She found a different line listed for after-hours client support. "Pinnacle Marketing, this is Janet." "Hi," Kira said, trying to sound professional. "I'm calling to confirm a meeting with Bryce Landon tomorrow morning. Let me check our schedule." Typing sounds in the background. "I'm sorry, Mr. Landon is currently traveling internationally on a project. He won't be back in the office until Monday. Would you like me to connect you with someone else on his team?" "Internationally?" "Yes, ma'am. Paris, I believe. For the Johnson campaign presentation." Kira's vision blurred. "No, that's okay. I'll call back Monday." She hung up and turned off the shower. The bathroom had filled with steam, turning the mirror into a wall of white fog. She wiped it clear with her palm and stared at her reflection. dark circles under her eyes from too many late nights grading papers. Hair that needed cutting, pulled back in the same ponytail she'd worn for 2 years. 35 years old, and she looked tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. When had she stopped trying? When had they both stopped trying? Her phone rang. Marisol's name on the screen. "Hey, girl." Her college friend's voice came through warm and familiar. "Random question, but are you free for coffee tomorrow morning? Derek's with his dad this weekend, and I'm going stir-crazy." Marisol Kane had been Kira's roommate sophomore year at Georgia State. Now she lived 20 minutes away in Decatur, raising her 8-year-old son as a single mom after her ex-husband decided fatherhood interfered with his music career. "I can't tomorrow," Kira said. "Rain check." "Everything okay? You sound weird." Kira looked at herself in the mirror again. How long had she been pretending everything was fine when nothing felt fine anymore? "Can I call you back in a few minutes?" "Of course." Kira hung up and opened the bathroom door. The hallway was dark. Bryce must have gone to bed. She crept toward the living room and found it empty. Television still on, but muted. The couch cushions held the impression of his body. She turned off the TV and walked to their bedroom. Bryce lay on his side of the bed, back to the door, breathing deep and even. Already asleep, or pretending to be. Kira grabbed her phone and went back to the kitchen, closing the door behind her as quietly as possible. She called Marisol back. "Okay, now I'm worried," Marisol said. "What's going on?" "I think Bryce is cheating on me." The words came out flat and simple, like stating the weather or reading a grocery list. "Oh, honey, what happened?" Kira told her everything. Lena's call, the missing laptop, the credit card charges, the phone call to his office. Marisol listened without interrupting, making small sounds of sympathy and outrage in all the right places. "So let me get this straight," Marisol said when Kira finished. "Your sister saw him getting on a plane to Paris with another woman, but he's supposedly asleep in your bed right now. I know how it sounds. It sounds like your husband has been lying to you for months." Kira closed her eyes. Hearing someone else say it made it real in a way that her own suspicions hadn't. "What do I do?" "First, you don't do anything stupid or emotional," Marisol said firmly. "No screaming matches or throwing his clothes on the lawn. You gather evidence, you make a plan, and then you make decisions from a position of strength." "I don't feel strong right now." "You're the strongest person I know, Kira Sloan. Remember when you talked me out of going back to Derek's dad? You told me I deserved better than half-hearted love from a man who treated me like a backup plan." Kira did remember. She'd driven to Marisol's apartment at 2 in the morning, found her friend crying over a text message from her ex-husband asking to try again for the 4th time in 3 years. "That was different," Kira said. "No, it wasn't. And you know what you told me? You said forgiveness doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. You said some things can't be fixed, only ended." "I said that." "You did, and you were right." Kira looked around her kitchen at the student papers still scattered across the island, at the coffee maker Bryce had bought her for her birthday 2 years ago, at the photo of them from their honeymoon in Savannah that hung beside the refrigerator. Young Kira and young Bryce smiled out from the frame, arms around each other on River Street, eyes bright with the certainty that they'd figured out how to be happy together. "I need proof," she said. "What kind of proof?" "Pictures. Documentation. Something concrete." "Lena's already seen him. That's a witness." "A witness to what? A man who looks like my husband getting on a plane? Any lawyer would tear that apart in 5 minutes." "So what's your plan?" Kira thought about it. Bryce would supposedly be home all day tomorrow, working on his Johnson campaign analysis. But his office said he was in Paris until Monday. "I'm going to catch him in the lie," she said. Kira woke up at 5:30, an hour before her alarm. Bryce still slept beside her, one arm thrown across his eyes to block the early morning light filtering through their bedroom curtains. She watched him breathe for a few minutes, studying his face for signs of deception she'd somehow missed over 8 years of marriage. He looked peaceful, innocent, like the man she'd fallen in love with at a marketing conference in downtown Atlanta, back when she was 26 and working as a coordinator at a nonprofit organization that helped at-risk youth find job training. Bryce had been presenting on social media strategies for small businesses. She'd sat in the back row, taking notes she didn't need, just enjoying the confident way he moved around the stage and made eye contact with different sections of the audience. During the coffee break, he'd found her by the pastry table. "Did I put you to sleep?" he'd asked, grinning. "Only during the part about conversion metrics," she'd replied, and he'd laughed like she'd said something genuinely funny instead of just mildly clever. They'd dated for 2 years before he proposed. Good years, full of weekend trips to Savannah and North Carolina, dinners with friends, lazy Sunday mornings reading different sections of the newspaper and trading comments about articles that caught their attention. Marriage had felt like the natural next step, as easy as everything else between them. The problem started when they began trying to have children. Kira slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, starting coffee and checking her phone for messages from Lena. Nothing, yet the flight would still be in the air for several more hours. She made breakfast mechanically, scrambling eggs and toasting bread while her mind wandered back to their fertility specialist appointments. Dr. Richardson had been kind but direct about their options after the first year of unsuccessful attempts. "There's no obvious physical cause," she'd explained during their consultation. "Sometimes these things take time, but we can explore some interventions that might help." The interventions had taken over their lives. Temperature tracking, ovulation predictions, scheduled intimacy that felt more like medical procedures than expressions of love, hormone injections that made Kira emotional and nauseated, monthly disappointments that grew heavier each time. After the second year, Bryce had started working longer hours. He'd claimed the increased workload was temporary. His company was expanding, taking on bigger clients, and he needed to prove himself worthy of the promotion they'd been dangling in front of him. But Kira suspected the real reason was simpler. He was tired of their home feeling like a fertility clinic, tired of conversations that revolved around ovulation windows and progesterone levels, and whether this month would finally be different from all the others. She understood the feeling. Some days, she was tired of it too. The third year had been the worst. 3 miscarriages, 2 of them so early they barely counted as pregnancies, just late periods and positive tests that lasted less than a week. The third had made it to 8 weeks before her body gave up again, and by then they'd told both sets of parents and started looking at cribs online. "Maybe we should take a break," Bryce had suggested after that loss, holding her while she cried in their bed. "Focus on us for a while." She'd agreed because she couldn't imagine going through another cycle of hope and failure. But focusing on us had somehow translated into focusing on everything except each other. Bryce threw himself into work with renewed intensity, traveling more, staying late, coming home with stories about client dinners and conference calls that ran past midnight. Kira threw herself into her job at the middle school, taking on extra counseling cases and volunteering for committees that met after regular hours. They'd started living parallel lives in the same house, crossing paths at breakfast and bedtime, but rarely connecting in between. The marriage counseling had been Kira's idea. Dr. Martinez came recommended by their physician, a specialist in couples therapy, who promised to help them rediscover their emotional intimacy. Their first session had been awkward, but hopeful. They'd sat on opposite ends of a beige couch in Dr. Martinez's office, taking turns explaining their perspectives on what had gone wrong. "I feel like we're roommates instead of spouses," Kira had said. "I feel like I can't do anything right," Bryce had responded. "Everything I say or don't say becomes evidence that I'm not supportive enough or present enough or whatever enough." Dr. Martinez had nodded and taken notes, then assigned them homework. Weekly date nights where they weren't allowed to discuss fertility treatments or work stress. Daily check-ins where they shared one thing they appreciated about each other and one thing they needed more of in their relationship. The exercises had felt forced at first, like performing intimacy instead of feeling it. But gradually, Kira had started looking forward to their check-ins. It was nice to hear Bryce say he appreciated the way she made him laugh, or that he needed more physical affection that wasn't connected to making babies. They'd been making progress, or so she'd thought. But somewhere around the fourth session, Bryce's enthusiasm had begun to wane. "Do we really need to keep talking about the same things over and over?" he'd asked after Dr. Martinez assigned them a communication exercise about expressing needs without blame. "That's how therapy works," Kira had said. "You practice new patterns until they become natural." "It doesn't feel natural. It feels like homework. So does marriage sometimes. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing." But Bryce had started finding reasons to miss sessions. Client emergencies that couldn't wait. Last-minute business trips that had been on the books for weeks, despite never being mentioned until the day before departure. By August, they'd stopped scheduling appointments altogether. "I think we're in a better place now," Bryce had said when Kira suggested they continue therapy. "We don't fight as much." He'd been right about not fighting, but they also didn't talk as much, didn't laugh as much, didn't touch each other as much. Peace through avoidance wasn't the same thing as genuine harmony. Now, standing in their kitchen at 6 a.m. while her possibly unfaithful husband slept upstairs, Kira wondered if she'd mistaken the absence of conflict for the presence of happiness. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Lena. Borrowed phone from flight attendant. Landing in 20 minutes. Will call you from hotel." Kira deleted the message and poured herself coffee. Today would bring answers one way or another. T7:30. Kira heard Bryce moving around upstairs. Shower running, closet door opening and closing, the familiar sounds of his morning routine. She stayed in the kitchen, drinking coffee and pretending to review lesson plans for her first period guidance sessions. He appeared 15 minutes later, dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt, the same clothes he wore to the office. "Morning," he said, kissing the top of her head as he reached for a travel mug from the cabinet. "Thought you were working from home today." "I am, but I might run out later for lunch or coffee or something. Didn't want to sit around in pajamas all day." The explanation sounded reasonable, but Kira noticed he'd packed his usual work bag, the leather messenger bag that had been empty last night. "How's the Johnson campaign coming along?" "Good. Should have the analysis finished by this afternoon." He poured coffee into his travel mug and added cream. "What about you?" "Crazy day." "The usual teenage drama." "Well, have fun with that." Another kiss, this one on her forehead. "See you tonight." He headed toward the garage. Kira listened for the sound of his car starting, then waited 5 more minutes before moving to the front window. His Honda was gone from the driveway. She called his office again, using the main number this time. "Pinnacle Marketing, this is Rebecca." "Hi, I'm trying to reach Bryce Landon." "I'm sorry, Mr. Landon is traveling this week. He won't be back until Monday. Can I take a message or transfer you to someone else on his team?" "Actually, I'm his wife. I was just confirming his travel dates. He's in Paris until Sunday, right?" "Let me check." Typing sounds. "Yes, that's correct. Paris through Sunday, then flying back Monday morning." "Perfect. Thanks." Kira hung up and stared at her phone. If Bryce was supposedly in Paris until Sunday, why had he just left their house dressed for work? She opened their banking app and refreshed the credit card statement. A new charge had appeared overnight. Delta Airlines, $1,847. The purchase timestamp showed 11:23 p.m. the previous evening, while Bryce had been sitting on their couch watching television. Or while someone who looked like Bryce had been sitting on their couch. Her phone rang. "Lena, I'm at my hotel," her sister said without preamble. "We need to talk." "Okay, not over the phone. Can you come to Atlanta Airport? I have a 6-hour layover before my next flight." Kira looked at the clock. 8:15. She could call in sick, drive to the airport, and be back home before Bryce returned from wherever he'd gone. "Meet me at the Delta Sky Club in Terminal B," Lena said. 1 hour. The drive to the airport gave Kira time to think. She ran through possible explanations for what she discovered, searching for innocent reasons why her husband might have lied about his location and travel plans. Maybe he'd planned a surprise trip for them and wanted to keep it secret until the last minute. But that didn't explain the charges for expensive hotels or the woman Lena had seen him with. Maybe he was planning to leave her and was using work trips to scout apartments in other cities. But why involve another woman in apartment hunting? Maybe he was having some kind of mental health crisis and wasn't thinking clearly about the stories he'd been telling. But the lies were too consistent, too well planned. By the time she reached the airport parking garage, Kira had eliminated every explanation except the obvious one that Lena was waiting at a corner table in the Sky Club, still wearing her pilot's uniform. She stood up as Kira approached, enveloping her in a hug that smelled like airplane coffee and recycled air. "You look terrible," Lena said. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." They sat down across from each other. Lena had ordered coffee and a plate of fruit that sat untouched between them. "Tell me what you found out," Lena said. Kira pulled out her phone and showed her sister the credit card charges, the airline purchase, the screenshots she'd taken of the hotel websites. Lena studied each image carefully, her expression growing more grim. $437 for one night at a Paris hotel, she said. "That's not a business trip expense." His office says he's traveling internationally for work, but he left the house this morning dressed like he was going to a regular day at the office. Because he is going to a regular day at the office. The man on my flight was Bryce, Kira. I'm certain of it, which means the man in your house is what? His evil twin brother? A body double hired to maintain his alibi. Lena leaned back in her chair, thinking, what if he flew out yesterday afternoon, early enough to make the evening flight to Paris, but arranged for someone to cover for him at home? Who would do that? A friend, a co-worker, someone who owed him a favor. Kira shook her head. That's insane. People don't do things like that. People don't usually cheat on their spouses either, but here we are. A flight announcement echoed through the club. Boarding for flight 892 to Denver. Lena glanced at her phone. I have to leave for my gate in 30 minutes, she said. But first, show me that picture you took last night. Kira found the photo and handed over her phone. Lena zoomed in on Bryce's face, examining it like she was studying a flight navigation chart. Same bone structure, she muttered. Same hairline. Same nose. She looked up. Kira, I think I was wrong about one thing. What? I don't think the man on my flight was Bryce. I think the man in your house isn't. The words hit Kira like a physical blow. That's impossible. Is it? When was the last time you really looked at him? I mean really looked, not just glanced over during breakfast or while he was watching TV. Kira thought about it. When had she last studied Bryce's face the way she used to when they were dating? When had she stopped paying attention to the details that made him uniquely himself? He felt familiar, she said weakly. Of course he did. Someone who knows Bryce well enough to fool, you would know how to act like him, how to move like him, what to say and how to say it. You think my husband hired someone to pretend to be him while he went to Paris with his girlfriend. I think your husband is desperate not to get caught. Kira stared at the photo on her phone. Now that Lena had planted the seed of doubt, she found herself examining every pixel. Did his nose look slightly different? Were his eyes the wrong shade of brown? Was his smile too practiced, too perfect? But the more she looked, the more convinced she became that she was seeing things that weren't there. Paranoia fed by betrayal, creating phantoms out of shadows. This is crazy, she said. Crazy enough to work, Lena replied. Think about it. How hard would it be to find someone who looks similar to Bryce? Hire him to spend a few hours at your house, watching TV and making small talk, while the real Bryce flies off to Paris with his mistress. Where would he even find someone like that? Acting agencies, escort services, Craigslist. Kira's stomach turned. The idea of Bryce shopping for a body double, like he was hiring a babysitter, felt too surreal to be real. But the alternative, that Bryce had somehow managed to be in two places at once, was equally impossible. What do I do? Kira asked. You go home and pay attention, Lena said. Look for things that seem off. Questions he can't answer. Habits he gets wrong. And then you confront him with evidence he can't deny. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm letting your sighting make me paranoid about perfectly innocent behavior? Lena reached across the table and took her hand. Then you apologize and get back to work on your marriage. But Kira, I've been flying for 12 years. I've seen thousands of people at close range under harsh airport lighting. I don't make mistakes about faces. A voice over the intercom called for all passengers on Flight 627 to London to begin boarding at Gate B14. That's me, Lena said, standing up. She hugged Kira again, tighter this time. Whatever happens, you're going to be okay. You're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. You will. Kira drove home in a fog, Lena's words replaying in her mind. Pay attention. Look for things that seem off. The house was empty when she arrived. No sign that anyone had been there since she'd left for the airport. She checked Bryce's study. The desktop computer was off. No papers scattered around the desk like there would be if he'd been working on a presentation. She called Marisol. Please tell me you're calling with good news, Marisol said. I need you to come over. Can you get someone to watch Derek? My mom's here until Sunday. I can leave right now. Thank you. While she waited, Kira went through the house room by room, looking for anything that seemed out of place or wrong. In their bedroom, she opened Bryce's dresser drawers again. Everything looked the same as it had the night before, but now she found herself wondering if someone else had arranged these clothes. Were the socks folded the way Bryce usually folded them? Were the shirts stacked in the right order? She was examining his collection of ties when she heard Marisol's car in the driveway. Okay, talk, Marisol said the moment she walked through the front door. She wore yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow looked deliberate and stylish. Kira told her about her conversation with Lena, the credit card charges, the phone call to Bryce's office, the theories about body doubles and alibis. Marisol listened without interrupting, her expression growing more incredulous with each detail. You think the man you had breakfast with this morning was an actor? She said when Kira finished. I don't know what to think anymore. Okay, let's step back from the crazy conspiracy theories for a minute. What's the simplest explanation for what's happening? Kira sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. That my husband is cheating on me. Right. And what's the simplest way for him to do that? Lie about work trips. Tell me he's staying home when he's actually flying to Paris with his girlfriend. Exactly. Marisol sat down beside her. You don't need body doubles or elaborate alibis. You just need a husband who's gotten comfortable lying. But I saw him last night. I talked to him. He was here. Was he here when you got Lena's call? Kira thought back to the previous evening. Yes, he was sitting right there on the couch. And what time did Lena call? Around 7:30. What time do flights to Paris usually leave? Kira pulled out her phone and searched for flight schedules. The Delta flight Lena mentioned left at 8:45 p.m. So if Bryce left her house at, say, 8 o'clock, he could have made that flight. Barely. He'd have to rush through security, but it's possible. And when did you go to bed? Around 10:30. He was already asleep when I came out of the bathroom. Marisol nodded slowly. or someone you thought was Bryce was already asleep. The room felt like it was tilting. Kira gripped the arm of the couch to steady herself. You really think he'd do something that elaborate? I think people do desperate things when they're trying to protect themselves, Marisol said. And I think you need to stop giving him the benefit of the doubt. What if I confront him and I'm wrong? What if you don't confront him and you're right? Kira's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. B. She showed the message to Marisol, who read it with raised eyebrows. He's texting you from someone else's phone. He must have forgotten his phone at home. They both looked around the living room, searching for Bryce's phone. Kira found it plugged into the charging station on the kitchen counter, exactly where he always left it when he worked from home. Convenient, Marisol said dryly. Kira stared at the phone. If Bryce had left for a normal day of working from home, why would he leave his phone behind? He was practically attached to the thing, checking emails and social media constantly throughout the day, unless he'd left it behind on purpose to maintain the illusion that he was still in Atlanta while he was actually in Paris. I need to call his hotel, Kira said. Which one? She pulled up the screenshot of the Hotel Le Grand Paris charge. The website listed a phone number for guest services. IT took 3 transfers and a long hold, but eventually a desk clerk with heavily accented English confirmed that yes, they had a guest registered under the name Bryce Landon, and yes, he was currently checked in. Would you like me to connect you to his room? The clerk asked. Kira's heart pounded. No, thank you. I just wanted to confirm the reservation. She hung up and looked at Marisol, who was watching her with a mixture of sympathy and anger. He's there, Kira said. I'm sorry, honey. 8 years, Kira said. 8 years of marriage, and this is how it ends. It doesn't have to end. Some couples work through infidelity. Kira thought about Dr. Martinez, their marriage counselor, and all the exercises they'd practiced about rebuilding trust and communication. She thought about the months of fertility treatments and the miscarriages and the slow drift toward parallel lives. She thought about forgiveness and whether some betrayals were too fundamental to forgive. No, she said. I can't do that. You don't have to decide anything right now. Yes, I do. Kira stood up from the couch, feeling clearer than she had in months. I grew up in a house where my parents stayed together for all the wrong reasons, where they taught me that marriage meant accepting whatever behavior your spouse dished out as long as they didn't actually leave. Marisol nodded. She'd heard these stories before, during late-night conversations in their college dorm room when Kira had wondered aloud whether she'd ever be able to trust anyone enough to build a real partnership. I promised myself I'd never live like that, Kira continued. I'd never stay in a relationship with someone who treated me like I was disposable. Bryce doesn't treat you like you're disposable, doesn't he? Kira gestured toward his phone, still plugged into the charger. He's in Paris with another woman, Mari. He hired someone to lie to me, to sit in my house and pretend to be my husband while he's off playing house with his girlfriend. How is that not treating me like I'm disposable? Marisol didn't have an answer for that. Kira's phone rang. Lena's number. I'm in London, Lena said when Kira answered. 4-hour layover. What did you find out? Kira told her about the phone call to the Paris hotel, about Bryce's phone left behind on the kitchen counter, about the text message from an unknown number. That bastard, Lena said. I'm flying back to Atlanta tomorrow morning. Can you pick me up at the airport? You don't need to. Yes, I do. You're going to confront him, and you shouldn't do it alone. I can handle it. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. After they hung up, Marisol made tea, and they sat in Kira's kitchen, talking through the logistics of confrontation. What evidence to present, what questions to ask, what outcome to prepare for. The hardest part won't be proving he's been lying, Marisol said. It'll be listening to his justifications and not letting them change your mind. What do you mean? He's going to have reasons. Good ones. He'll say the affair meant nothing, that he loves you, that he was confused or lonely or going through some kind of crisis. He'll promise to end it, to go back to therapy, to do whatever it takes to save your marriage. Kira thought about the Bryce she'd fallen in love with, the one who'd made her laugh during coffee breaks at marketing conferences, the one who'd held her while she cried after their miscarriages, who'd brought her soup when she was sick, who'd learned to make her favorite cookies from scratch because she'd mentioned missing the ones her grandmother used to bake. That Bryce would say all the right things. He'd be persuasive and remorseful and utterly convincing. I can't let him talk me out of what I know is true, she said. Then don't give him the chance. Decide what you want before you confront him, and stick to your decision no matter what he says. Kira nodded. She already knew what she wanted. She wanted her husband to leave. Bryce came home at 8:30 Friday evening, carrying takeout bags from their favorite Thai restaurant and wearing the same clothes he'd left in that morning. His hair was slightly mussed, his shirt wrinkled in a way that suggested he'd been sitting in meetings or conference rooms all day. "Sorry, I'm so late," he said, setting the food on the kitchen counter. The Johnson presentation turned into a total disaster. Kevin accidentally deleted half the files, and we spent 3 hours trying to recreate everything. The lie came so easily, delivered with just the right amount of frustration and exhaustion. If Kira hadn't spent the past 2 days collecting evidence of his deception, she might have believed him. "Rough day," she said. "The worst. But I got us pad thai and those spring rolls you like." He unpacked the containers, arranging them on the counter with the same casual efficiency he'd always shown when bringing home dinner. "How was your day?" "Educational." Something in her tone made him pause. He looked at her more carefully, taking in her expression and posture. "Everything okay?" "We need to talk." Bryce's face went through a series of micro-expressions: confusion, concern, calculation. Then he smiled, the same warm smile that had charmed her at a marketing conference 8 years earlier. "Sounds serious. Should I be worried?" "That depends on how you define worried." She led him to the living room, to the same couch where he'd been sitting when Lena called, where someone had been sitting, pretending to be him. They sat on opposite ends, facing each other. Kira had rehearsed this conversation in her mind dozens of times over the past 2 days, but now that the moment had arrived, her carefully planned words felt inadequate. "I know about Paris," she said. Bryce blinked. "What about Paris?" "I know you're not working from home. I know you flew there Wednesday night with a woman. I know you're staying at Hotel Le Grand Paris in a junior suite that costs more than our monthly mortgage payment." The color drained from Bryce's face, but he recovered quickly. "Kira, I don't know what you think you know, but I called your office multiple times. They said you're traveling internationally until Monday." She pulled out her phone and showed him the credit card statement. $437 at a Paris hotel, charged to our joint credit card on Wednesday night. Bryce stared at the screen. There must be some mistake. "Delta Airlines charged us $1847 Wednesday night at 11:23 p.m. while you were sitting right here watching television." She scrolled to show him that transaction too. "Except it wasn't you, was it?" "Kira." "Stop." Her voice came out sharper than she'd intended, cutting through his attempt at deflection. "I called the hotel this morning. They confirmed you're registered and currently checked in. So please don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is some kind of accounting error." Bryce set down his phone and rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up, his expression had changed: less denial, more resignation. "How did you find out?" "My sister saw you boarding the flight. With your girlfriend, Lena. She was piloting a different flight out of JFK. Saw you at the gate with some blonde woman hanging on your arm." Bryce closed his eyes. "Fuck. Is that her name?" "What?" "Your girlfriend. Is her name Fuck, Or should I call her something else when I introduce myself? Kira, please. What's her name, Bryce? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Then, Claudia. How long? How long what? How long have you been sleeping with Claudia? Another pause. 6 months. 6 months. While they'd been going to marriage counseling, working on their emotional intimacy, and completing Dr. Martinez's homework assignments about appreciating each other, Bryce had been building a relationship with someone else. Where did you meet her? She's a consultant. We worked on a project together. The Johnson campaign. No, a different client. Last spring. Kira thought back to last spring, April and May, when Bryce had started working longer hours and traveling more frequently. When he'd begun going to the gym in the mornings and buying new clothes and seeming lighter somehow, more energetic than he'd been in months, she'd attributed the changes to work success and their decision to take a break from fertility treatments. But he'd been falling in love with someone else. Does she know you're married? Bryce shifted uncomfortably. It's complicated. How is it complicated? She knows I'm married, but I told her we were separated. The words hit like a physical blow. Not only had Bryce been cheating, but he'd been pretending their marriage was already over, rewriting their history to make himself available to someone else. We're not separated, Kira said. I know. We live in the same house. We eat dinner together. We went to marriage counseling together as recently as 3 months ago. I know. But you told her we were separated. Yes. Why? Bryce looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd started presenting evidence, his expression seemed genuine, pained but honest. Because I wanted to be separated, he said. Because I've wanted out of this marriage for 2 years, but I didn't know how to tell you. The admission knocked the breath out of her. She'd been prepared for lies and denials and attempts at justification. She hadn't been prepared for the truth. 2 years. Since the last miscarriage. Maybe before that. Why didn't you just ask for a divorce? Because you would have tried to fix it. You would have wanted to go to therapy and work on our problems and figure out how to make things better between us. And that's bad because I didn't want to fix it, Kira. I wanted out. The room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of traffic on their street. Kira stared at her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, and tried to process what he'd just told her. So you decided to have an affair instead of asking for what you wanted. I didn't plan it. It just happened. For 6 months. Yes. Including trips to Paris and Boston and God knows where else. Yes. While lying to me about work conferences and client emergencies. Bryce nodded. And hiring someone to pretend to be you, so I wouldn't suspect anything. His head snapped up. What? Wednesday night, when Lena saw you at the airport. Someone was here, sitting on this couch, pretending to be you. Kira, that's insane. No one was pretending to be me. Then, how do you explain being in 2 places at once? I can't. He spread his hands helplessly. But I swear to you, I never hired anyone to impersonate me. I wouldn't even know how to do something like that. She studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but his confusion seemed genuine, which meant either he was a better actor than she'd given him credit for, or she'd been wrong about the body double theory. What time did you leave for the airport Wednesday? Around 6. I got home from work at 5:15. You were here. No, I left at 4:30. Right after you called to say you'd be late because of that parent conference. Kira tried to remember Wednesday afternoon. She'd stayed after school to meet with Tyler Morrison's mother about his attendance issues. The conference had run long, and she'd called Bryce around 4:15 to let him know she'd be late getting home. But she distinctly remembered him being on the couch when Lena called at 7:30. Unless she didn't, Kira closed her eyes and forced herself to replay that evening in detail. Coming home to an empty house. Grading papers at the kitchen island. Getting Lena's call. Looking into the living room and seeing. What had she seen exactly? A figure on the couch, backlit by the television. Dark hair, familiar posture, the same casual way of holding the remote control that she'd observed thousands of times over 8 years of marriage. But had she actually looked at his face? Had they made eye contact? Had she heard his voice clearly? Or had she just assumed the person on the couch was Bryce, because who else would it be? "You left at 4:30, she said slowly. "Yes." "And I got home at 5:15. "Yes." "So who was sitting on our couch at 7:30? Bryce looked genuinely confused. "No one. The house was empty when you got home." But it hadn't been empty. Someone had been there. Someone had asked if she wanted anything from the refrigerator, had kissed her goodnight, had been sleeping in their bed when she came out of the bathroom. Someone who'd looked and sounded and moved exactly like her husband. The realization hit her like ice water. She'd been so focused on Bryce's deception that she'd missed the simpler explanation. There hadn't been anyone on the couch Wednesday night. She'd seen what she'd expected to see, heard what she'd expected to hear. Her mind had filled in the details of a familiar scene Bryce watching television after work without registering that the scene was actually an empty room and the sound of her own thoughts. The stress of their failing marriage, the exhaustion from years of fertility treatments and parallel living, the growing suspicion that something was wrong, all of it had created the perfect conditions for her brain to manufacture a comforting illusion. Bryce had been on a plane to Paris with his girlfriend, while Kira had been having conversations with a memory. "I've been losing my mind," she said. "What do you mean?" She told him about the past 2 days, the theories about body doubles, the conversations with Lena and Marisol, the conviction that someone had been impersonating him in their house. Bryce listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. "Kira, you need to see someone," he said when she finished. "A doctor. This level of confusion, it's not normal." "I'm not confused about the affair." "No, you're right about that. But everything else." He gestured vaguely. "This sounds like a breakdown." Maybe it was a breakdown. Maybe discovering your husband's betrayal while processing years of accumulated grief and disappointment was enough to temporarily scramble anyone's perception of reality. But the affair was real. The hotel charges were real. The lies were real. The rest was just her mind's way of protecting itself from a truth too painful to accept all at once. "I want you to leave," she said. "Tonight." "Tonight." Bryce nodded. "Where should I go?" "I don't care. Hotel, friend's house, Paris. Wherever you want, as long as it's not here." "What about our stuff?" "The house." "We'll figure that out later. Right now, I just need you gone." He stood up from the couch, then paused. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. About the lying, about the way this happened. You deserved better." "Yes, I did." "Is there any chance we could try to work this out? Go back to therapy, figure out how to?" "No." The word came out flat and final. Kira looked at her husband, at this man she'd shared 8 years of her life with, who'd held her through miscarriages and fertility treatments and family celebrations and ordinary Tuesday nights, and felt nothing but exhaustion. "I can't forgive this, Bryce. I won't." He nodded, understanding. "I'll pack some things." While he was upstairs, Kira sat on the couch and tried to imagine what her life would look like tomorrow, next week, next month. The house would feel too big with just her in it. She'd have to tell her parents, her co-workers, the friends who'd known them as a couple. But underneath the sadness and uncertainty, she felt something else. Relief. For the first time in months, she knew exactly where she stood. Saturday morning, Kira drove to the airport to pick up Lena. Her sister emerged from the jet bridge, looking professional in her pilot's uniform. But her expression softened with concern when she saw Kira waiting. "How did it go?" Lena asked as they walked toward baggage claim. "He's gone." "Good." He admitted everything. The affair, the lies, all of it. "What about the body double thing?" Kira explained her realization about Wednesday night, how stress and suspicion had created an illusion that felt completely real at the time. "I thought I was going crazy," she said. "You were processing betrayal," Lena replied. "Your brain was trying to make sense of information that didn't fit with what you thought you knew about your marriage. It's not crazy to have a temporary break from reality when reality becomes impossible to accept." They drove back to Kira's house, where Lena made coffee and insisted on cooking breakfast, while Kira sat at the kitchen island and stared at the same student files she'd been grading Wednesday night. "Have you talked to Mom and Dad yet?" Lena asked. "Not yet. They're going to want to help." Their parents had liked Bryce, but they'd always loved Kira more. When she called to tell them about the separation, they'd drive down from Macon immediately, armed with casseroles and unsolicited advice about divorce lawyers. "I need to call Claudia first," Kira said. "The girlfriend. She deserves to know the truth about what she's been involved in." Lena raised an eyebrows. "You're going to call your husband's mistress?" "She's not his mistress. She's a woman who was lied to by a married man." It took some detective work to find Claudia Mercer's contact information. She was listed on the website for a marketing consulting firm in New York, with a professional headshot that showed an attractive blonde woman in her early 30s. Kira called the main number for the consulting firm and asked to be transferred to Claudia's extension. Claudia Mercer. "Hi, my name is Kira Sloan. I'm Bryce Landon's wife." Silence on the other end of the line. "I think we need to talk," Kira continued. Yes, we do." Claudia's voice was soft shaken. "Is Bryce there?" "No. He moved out last night." "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that he was still married." "He told me you were separated. He said you'd been living apart since last year and were just waiting for the divorce paperwork to be finalized." Kira felt a flash of anger at Bryce's elaborate deception, but it passed quickly. Claudia had been lied to as much as she had. "We've been living together this whole time," Kira said. "In the same house, same bed. We were even going to marriage counseling as recently as 3 months ago. I feel sick." Claudia's voice was barely above a whisper. 6 months. I've been seeing him for 6 months, and I thought he was free to be in a relationship." "What did he tell you about me?" "That you'd grown apart after some medical issues, that the divorce was amicable but taking time because of property division, that you were both ready to move on." Medical issues. Kira supposed that was one way to describe years of failed fertility treatments. "None of that was true," she said. "I know that now." Claudia took a shaky breath. "What can I do? How can I make this right?" "End it. Don't see him anymore. Don't take his calls. Let him deal with the consequences of what he's done." "Already done. I told him this morning that I never wanted to see him again. He's in Paris." "I know. I flew back early. Last night, after you confronted him, he called me crying, saying you'd found out about us and that he'd handled everything wrong." So Bryce had spent Friday night calling his girlfriend instead of trying to repair his marriage. That told Kira everything she needed to know about his priorities. "For what it's worth," Claudia continued, "I think you're better off without him. Anyone who would lie that extensively to 2 people who trusted him, that's not someone worth fighting for." After they hung up, Kira felt lighter somehow. The conversation had been awkward and painful, but it had also been necessary. Claudia wasn't the enemy, she was another victim of Bryce's deception. Lena had been listening from the kitchen. "How do you feel?" "Tired, but also relieved." "Good. That means you're processing this in a healthy way." They spent the rest of the morning calling family members. Kira's parents, as predicted, wanted to drive down immediately. Lena's partner Victor offered to fly in from Seattle to provide moral support. Even Marisol's mother, who'd only met Kira a few times, sent a text offering to bring over homemade soup and chocolate chip cookies. You have good people in your life, Lena observed. I do. And you're going to be okay. I think so. Sunday afternoon, Kira's parents arrived with enough food to feed a small army and a determination to support their daughter through whatever came next. Her father, usually a man of few words, hugged her longer than usual and whispered that he was proud of her for choosing self-respect over false peace. Her mother, more emotional, cried a little while helping Kira sort through wedding photos and shared belongings. I never liked how he made you feel like you had to earn his attention, she said, carefully removing their wedding portrait from its frame. A good husband doesn't make his wife compete for affection. Looking back, Kira could see the truth in that observation. How many times had she tried to be more interesting, more understanding, more accommodating, hoping to recapture the easy intimacy they'd shared in the early years, but intimacy couldn't be earned through performance. It had to be freely given by both partners. That evening, the extended family gathered in Kira's kitchen, her parents, Lena, Victor, Marisol, and her son Derek. They ate takeout Chinese food and played board games and told stories that had nothing to do with marriage or divorce or betrayal. For the first time in months, the house felt alive with conversation and laughter. This is nice, Derek announced during a particularly competitive game of Scrabble. It's like a party, but without having to get dressed up. Everyone laughed, and Kira realized the 8-year-old had captured something important. This was what family was supposed to feel like: supportive, comfortable, genuine, not performance or obligation. But choiced she'd lost a marriage, but she'd gained clarity about what really mattered. 3 weeks later, Kira sat in her divorce attorney's office, signing papers that would legally end her 8-year marriage. The process had been surprisingly straightforward: no children to consider, no complicated business assets to divide, and a husband who seemed eager to resolve things quickly and quietly. Bryce had agreed to let her keep the house in exchange for taking responsibility for most of their joint debt. He'd also agreed to pay her attorney's fees, which Kira considered reasonable compensation for 6 months of elaborate deception. That's the last signature, the lawyer said, gathering the documents into a neat stack. The decree will be final in 30 days. Kira walked out of the office, feeling simultaneously exhausted and energized. She'd spent 3 weeks documenting their shared life, dividing belongings and negotiating the terms of their separation. Now it was done. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marisol. How did it go? It's over. Celebration dinner tonight? My treat. Yes, please. That evening, Kira changed her name back to Sloan in the school district system. It felt symbolic, reclaiming the identity she'd carried before marriage, before fertility treatments, before years of trying to be someone she wasn't in service of a relationship that had been failing longer than she'd wanted to admit. She also submitted paperwork for sabbatical leave for the spring semester. The principal had been supportive, understanding that major life transitions sometimes required time to heal and regroup. What will you do with 4 months off? Dr. Henderson had asked. I'm not sure yet. Maybe travel, maybe volunteer, maybe just figure out who I am when I'm not trying to save a marriage. The sabbatical would give her time to think, to plan, to decide what she wanted her life to look like going forward. She had savings, a supportive family, and a career she could return to when she was ready. She also had something she hadn't possessed in years: complete autonomy over her choices. 2 months later, on a Saturday evening in late January, Kira stood on Lena's rooftop deck overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Her sister had flown in for the weekend, and they'd invited Victor, Marisol, and a few other close friends for an impromptu dinner party. The weather was unseasonably warm for January, and someone had strung lights around the railing, creating a cozy atmosphere as the sun set behind the downtown buildings. To new beginnings, Lena said, raising her glass of wine. To honest relationships, Victor added. To women who choose self-respect over settling, Marisol chimed in. To family that shows up when you need them most, Kira finished. They clinked glasses and sipped wine while the city lights began to twinkle below them. Kira felt peaceful in a way she hadn't experienced in years, not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the solid peace of knowing exactly where she stood. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, her stomach clenched, wondering if Bryce was trying to contact her. But when she opened the message, it was from a different source entirely. "Hi, Ms. Sloan. This is Tyler Morrison from your guidance sessions last semester. I know you're on sabbatical, but wanted you to know I've been accepted to 3 colleges. Thanks for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Hope you're having a great break." Kira smiled and showed the message to her friends. Tyler had been one of her most challenging cases. A bright kid whose attendance problems and family instability had been masking anxiety and depression. She'd spent countless hours that fall helping him navigate college applications and financial aid forms, while also connecting him with mental health resources. "That's what you should do with your sabbatical," Marisol said after reading the text. "Start a nonprofit or something. Help other women going through major life transitions." "I've actually been thinking about that," Kira admitted. "There are so many women who stay in bad relationships because they don't know how to rebuild their lives afterward. Maybe I could create workshops or support groups or something." "You could call it New Chapters," Lena suggested. "Help people write the next part of their story." The idea sparked something in Kira's chest excitement, purpose, the same feeling she'd gotten in college when she'd first discovered her love for counseling and helping others navigate difficult transitions. "I'd need training, certification, business licenses." "You'd figure it out," Victor said. "You're good at helping people see their own strength." As the evening wound down and her friends prepared to leave, Kira stood alone on the rooftop for a few minutes, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Bryce was living his new life with Claudia, or maybe with someone else entirely. She found that she didn't particularly care either way. His choices belonged to him now. Her choices belonged to her, and for the first time in years, the possibilities felt limitless. 6 months later, Kira opened the doors to New Chapters Counseling Services, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women and men navigate major life transitions. Her first client was a woman named Janet, recently divorced after 23 years of marriage, who sat in Kira's office and said exactly what Kira had felt that night when Lena first called about the flight to Paris. "I don't know who I am anymore when I'm not half of a couple." "That's okay," Kira told her, settling into her chair with the confidence that came from having asked herself the same question and found an answer. "We'll figure it out together." Through the office window, afternoon sunlight streamed across her desk, illuminating the framed photo she'd placed there, not a wedding portrait or romantic vacation snapshot, but a picture from Lena's rooftop party, surrounded by the people who'd shown up when her life fell apart and helped her build something better from the pieces. She'd learned that forgiveness wasn't always necessary for healing. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do for yourself was to simply walk away from people who treated your trust like a disposable commodity. Some bridges were meant to be burned, but some chapters were meant to be rewritten entirely.